Welcome to another edition of Morning Gem Poetry. I'm Jim Ransom, and I have collected three of my favorite poems from a diverse group of poets, at least as far as their styles and thinking is concerned. The poets are Dylan Thomas and Robert Penn Warren and Billy Collins. They all have very different styles. And I selected these poems not so much because of any stories they tell, but because of the way they use rhyme or no rhyme and rhythm or very clever images. Let's go with Billy Collins first. And the poem I'm going to be reading is from this book called Sailing Alone Around the Room. This is a fairly early book by Billy. And you may remember he was a poet laureate a few years ago, poet laureate of the United States. That may not have quite as much significance as being the poet laureate of the United Kingdom, but it's okay. The best cigarette. There are many that I miss, having sent my last one out a car window, sparking along the road one night, years ago. The heralded ones, of course, after sex, the two glowing tips, now the lights of a single ship. At the end of a long dinner with more wine to come and a smoke ring coasting into the chandelier. Or on a white beach, holding one with fingers, still wet from a swim. How bittersweet these punctuations of flame and gesture. But the best were on those mornings when I would have a little something going in the typewriter, the sun bright in the windows, maybe some Berlitz on in the background. I would go into the kitchen for coffee, and on the way back to the page, curled in its roller, I would light one up and feel its dry rush mix with the dark taste of coffee. Then I would be my own locomotive, trailing behind me as I returned to work, little puffs of smoke, indicators of progress, signs of industry and thought. The signal that told the 19th century it was moving forward. That was the best cigarette. When I would steam into the study full of vaporous hope and stand there, the big headlamp of my face pointed down at all the words in parallel lines. That's, I think, a pretty clever poem, and I think I can understand from that Billy has given up smoking, but he can't help reminiscing about it, can he? Now, let's read a poem by Dylan Thomas. It's called Especially When the October Wind, and it's from this book. It's the collected poems of Dylan Thomas. Don't ask me when I got this. It's been quite a while ago, however. Especially when the October wind with frosty fingers punishes my hair, caught by the crabbing sun, I walk on fire and cast a shadow crab upon the land. By the sea's side, hearing the noise of birds, hearing the raven cough in winter's sticks, my busy heart, who shudders as she talks, sheds the syllabic blood and drains her words. Shut to in a tower of words, I mark on the horizon, walking like the trees, the wordy shapes of women and the rows of the star-gestured children in the park. Some let me make you of the voweled beeches, some of the oaken voices from the roots of many a thorny shire tell you notes. Some let me make you of the winter's speeches. Behind a pot of ferns, the wagging clock tells me the hour's word, the neural meaning flies on the shafted disk, declaims the morning and tells the windy weather in the cock. Some let me make you of the meadow's signs, the signal grass that tells me all I know, breaks with the wormy winter through the eye. Some let me tell you of the raven's sins, especially when the October wind. Some let me make you of autumnal spells, the spider-tongued and the loud hill of Wales, with fist of turnips, punishes the land. Some let me make you of the heartless words. The heart is drained, that spelling in the scurry of chemic blood, warned of the coming fury by the sea's side. Hear the dark voweled birds. Well, that's a very typical Dylan Thomas poem, I think. It took me several readings to really get it, you might say. The beautiful change of rhythm when he says, some let me make you of autumnal words, and so on. It's a great poem. The poem, of course, is warning of the coming fury, and he's talking about the soon-to-be onset of winter. But could we take it to mean death in the not-too-distant future? And it is true that Dylan Thomas died at the age of 39 after consuming his 14th pour of whiskey, straight whiskey. All right, let's move on to a more abstemious poet, Robert Penn Warren. And we're going to read a poem called What Was the Promise That Smiled from the Maples at Evening? You will note from the start that the rhythm of this poem is much different from what we've heard so far. What was the promise that smiled from the maples at evening, smiling dim from the shadow recessed? What language of leaf lip? And the heels of the fathers clicked on the concrete, returning each aware of his own unspecified burden at sundip. Beneath pale hydrangeas, first firefly utters cold burning. The sun is well down now, first star has now winked. What was the promise when bullbats dizzied the sunset? They skimmer and skitter in gold light at great height. The guns of big boys on the common go boom past regret. Boys shout when hit bullbat spins down in that gold light. Too little to shoot, but next year you'll be a big boy. So shout now and pick up the bird. Why, that's blood. It is wet. Its eyes are still open. Your heart in the throat swells like joy. What was the promise when, after the last light had died, children gravely down walks in spring dark under maples drew trains of shoeboxes empty with windows, with candles inside, going chuck, chuck, and blowing for crossings, lonely. Ooh, ooh. But on impulse you fled, and they called across the dark lawn. Long calling your name, who now lay in the darkness to hide, while the sad little trains glimmer on under maples and so on. What was the promise when, after the dying was done, all the long years before, like burnt paper, flared into black, and the house shrunk to silence, the odor of flowers near gone, recollection of childhood was natural. Cold gust at the back. What door on the dark flings open, then suddenly bangs? Yes, Something was lost in between, but it's long the way back. You sleep, but in sleep hear a door that creaks where it hangs. Long since, in a cold and coagulate evening, I've stood where they slept, the long dead, and the farms and far woods fled away. And a gray light prevailed, and both landscape and heart were subdued. Then sudden, the ground at my feet was like glass, and I say what I saw deep down, and the fleshly habiliments rent, but a gleam and a phosphorus of glory. Bones bathed, there they lay, side by side, Ruth and Robert, the illumination then spent. Earth was earth, and in the earth dark, no glow now. Therefore I lifted my gaze to that world which had once been the heart's familiar, swell of woods and far field sweep. In twilight by stream gleam now wefted, railroad yonder and coal chute, town roofs far under the first star. Then her voice, long forgotten, calm and silent, said, "Child." Then his, with the calm of a night field or far star. We died only that every promise might be fulfilled. Well, that's somewhat of a complex poem, isn't it? First of all, you may note from the start that the rhythm of this poem is different. It is. I think it is in anapestic rhythm, so called because of the location of the stresses and syllables. It doesn't go ta-ta, 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 like iambic pentameter, for example. It goes ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, and then it tells its story. Well, that is going to have to be it for this time. I've broken some of my unspoken promises about reading poetry, one of which is to avoid technical details, such as iambs and anapaests. But, in fact, I am not going to even mention it again. So there. Please give me some ideas about what you might like to hear. And my email address, which I haven't given you before, is this: jimransom506@gmail.com. Let me repeat it for those of you who are fuddling and fiddling around for a pen or a pencil and a piece of scrap paper, which you'll probably lose later today. But here it is, jimransom506@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Bye now.